So I was playing a game not too long ago, and I was at a table with a player who was playing some Eldrazi, and my commander was Lazav Dimir Mastermind, this guy right here. So if anyone at home wants to have a look at him, he's a 3/3 for 2 blue and 2 black. He has hexproof, and his ability is whenever a creature card is put into an opponent's graveyard from anywhere, you may have Lazav Dimir Mastermind become a copy of that card, except its name is Lazav Dimir Mastermind. It's a legendary. It's legendary in addition to its other types, and it has hexproof and this ability, so the ability to shift into other creatures.
Oh, so this is about the Eldrazi that shuffle the graveyard?
Well, no. What happened was I used a Peleka's Predation, which is a spell that lets me look at my opponent's hand, or he reveals it, and then I can choose a card with a mana value of 3 or greater and discard it. And I hit Ulamog of the Ceaseless Hunger and threw it into his graveyard.
Okay.
So Lazav, I copied the ability copied that creature. But the way it's worded had me in an argument with the opponent player. So my opinion was, if I attack with Lazav, who's copying Ulamog, do I get to exile the top 20 cards of his library?
Gotcha.
Because his contention was
which Ulamog was it again? I'm sorry.
Ulamog of the Ceaseless Hunger.
Oh yeah, there he is. Okay.
So because my opinion was I get all the abilities on the card, but he argued that because Lazav Dimir Mastermind retained its name, but in the text box it says when Ulamog attacks.
Okay. Yeah. So. Yeah. I see what you're saying. So here's the thing, is that long time ago, any card that ever referred to itself always put its own name in it, and then eventually they, because text boxes got pretty overcrowded, they started doing that for only legendary creatures most of the time. They could kind of eventually do that. Now you'll notice pretty much the only cards that do that are legendary things that have a very unique name. But regardless, whenever an effect refers to itself, either saying its name, or it says this creature, or it says this card, or whatever, right? It just means this object. So even though Lazav has its own name, and same thing, if I had Chameleon, Master of Disguise, come in as a copy of something and that thing has the text of its own name in the box, Chameleon still has that ability and applies to itself because it just means this object, right?
So I was right. That was my argument.
Yeah.
My argument was that it's referring to itself.
Yeah. The only exception is going to be when something says cards named this, right? There's one of the from Lord of the Rings, there's Gollum. I think it's Gollum Obsessed Stalker. Hold on. Yeah, Gollum Obsessed Stalker says, at the beginning of your end step, each opponent dealt combat damage this game by a creature named Gollum Obsessed Stalker loses life equal to the, so at that point the name of the creature matters because it is looking for creatures with that specific name. But if it just said, dealt damage by Gollum Obsessed Stalker, then it just means dealt damage by this object. Right, so same thing here. So for Ulamog, when it attacks, Ulamog exiles, or when Ulamog attacks, however it's worded, when Ulamog the Ceaseless Hunger attacks, it just means when this object attacks. So it wouldn't be any different than something that says, when this creature attacks, or not attacks, but let's say when this creature dies, right? If it had a text on it that said when this creature dies, but something happened and it wasn't a creature when it died, that doesn't change anything. It just means when this object dies, right? So that just refers to itself. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, that definitely clears things up. I knew I was right.
Yeah. Hey, real quick, if you're looking to upgrade Magus Lucea Kane, let me put you on to just, I'm not gonna tell you how to build the whole deck, but let me put you on to two. One is a card and the other one is a concept. Okay? Mm-hmm. So one of the cards is Twinning Staff.
I've heard of that.
Twinning Staff is I say cheap as far as mana wise, it's cheap. I don't know how much it costs monetarily, but I think it's like a 2-drop artifact, but basically if you would copy a spell one or more times, copy it an additional time. Right, so when you tap, you tap Lucas Kane for mana, and then the next X spell you cast gets copied on the stack. Well, guess what? You're gonna copy it an additional time.
Okay.
Yeah.
I might have that card in one of my decks.
Yeah. Now, let me actually, before I go to the other thing, let me point something out that a lot of players get mixed up on, because I don't know if you're ever tempted to put this in that deck. But of course, if you copy a Hydra, let's say, for example, right? Like you copy this permanent spell, the copy will resolve as a token, right? Yeah. And what a lot of players like waste, and I say waste because it's a very expensive card, and unless you are specifically synergizing with both aspects of it, it is a waste. They waste their money on like a doubling season, right?
Yeah.
You know what doubling season does, right?
Yes, definitely.
Okay. All right, cool. Here's the thing about doubling season and copying permanent spells on the stack. Doubling season does not give you additional tokens because you are copying a permanent spell on the stack, and that copy resolves in the form of a token, but you did not create a token. Doubling season will not give you more. Yeah. So just to put that out there, so you don't waste money or whatever trying to get that, Now, if you're running like a million Hydras and doubling season wants to get you all those extra counters, cool, go for it, whatever. But I'm just saying, don't run it thinking you're going to get extra copies of these permanent creature spells that you're copying with, that. But now let me also put you onto another concept in this, is that, so the way Magus Lucea Kane works is that ability is you tap for the mana. It's a mana ability, instantly get the 2 colorless, and then it sets up what's called a delayed trigger. Right? Which basically it's this trigger that kind of waits on the sideline and waits for a specific thing to happen. Now, you don't have to spend Magus's mana on the spell to make it trigger. It's just, hey, the next time that you're activating this X ability or casting this X spell, this happens, right? Now, here's the thing. If you have a way to untap Magus Lucea Kane and retap it for mana, you now have 2 delayed triggers waiting. So the next time you cast an X spell, it gets copied twice. So if you have a way to untap it and tap it for mana multiple times, every time you do that, the next X spell you cast will get copied that many times.
Where's my binder? I might have an Umbral Mantle.
Oh yeah, for sure. Umbral, and again, you don't have to use Magus's mana on that spell that you want to copy, so you could just use Magus's mana to untap towards the Umbral Mantle, which I think costs 3 to untap, so you still gotta have another source there. But in any event,
fine, I can get that easily.
Yeah, or you could throw a Pemin's Aura or a Freed from the Reel onto, and then untap it for 1 blue. But every time you do that and retap it, it sets up another delayed trigger, right?
Okay.
And now here's the messed up thing. Let's say you've done that like 3 times, right? So you've tapped it, untapped it, tapped it, untapped, tapped it. So you've got like 3 delayed triggers waiting to go off, right? And you have that Twinning Staff on the battlefield. If you cast an X spell, Twinning Staff doesn't see it trying to get copied 3 times and adds 1. It sees each of those delayed triggers as an instance of copy that spell, so it adds 1 for each of them. So if you have 3 delayed triggers waiting with a Twinning Staff on the battlefield, you will get 6 extra copies when you cast that thing.
That's terrifying.
So, are you familiar with the casualty effect?
Yeah. Let's see. This is the additional cost to cast. You can sack a creature with power equal or greater than the casualty cost, and then copy the spell when you do that, right?
Yes, sir. Yeah. So the confusion comes in every once in a while. I think I have it figured out, but I always wanted to ask. When you casualty a creature that has a death trigger, could you explain to me how the stack breaks down when you casualty a creature with death trigger?
Yeah, sure. So you're saying so you're casting a spell, and then as an additional cost, you're sacrificing a creature, and the creature that you sacrificed has a death trigger, like when it dies, draw a card or something like that, right?
Yep, 100%.
Yeah. So what happens is there's multiple steps to casting a spell, right? And once you begin the process of casting a spell, nothing can interrupt that process. No triggers can go on the stack in the middle of casting the spell. So, which would include like triggers from paying the additional cost of sacrificing a creature. So what happens is you go through the entire process, right? You name your targets, you choose your modes, you decide if you're using additional costs like kicker or alternate costs like overload, or in this case casualty as an additional cost, right? You activate mana abilities, you pay your costs, all these steps that you've gone through. And during this process of casting that spell with casualty, because casualty is not a trigger after you cast the spell, right? It's not when you cast the spell you may sacrifice a creature with certain power, and if you do, copy the spell. It's as an additional cost to casting the spell, you sacrifice this creature. So that creature is sacrificed as a part of casting that spell. So while you're in the process of casting it. So now the spell is on the stack, and then we check state-based actions, and then all relevant triggers go onto the stack above that. So anything that was like a cast trigger goes onto the stack now, right? Anything that happened because you took an action while casting the spell goes onto the stack now. So like if I have a trigger that says, when I have a artifact go to the graveyard, target opponent loses a life, and I sacrificed a treasure to cast that spell, that trigger now goes onto the stack, right? Same thing here with your casualty. You sacrifice that creature as part of the process of casting the spell. So after the spell is finished its process of casting it, it's on the stack, we check state-based actions, now all relevant triggers go onto the stack, which includes whatever trigger happened because that creature died. So the trigger will go above the spell and resolve before the spell does.
So that makes total sense. I've gone through a lot of the Spellslinger stuff back in the day. I guess the problem that I always had, specifically with Casualty and Anhelo, right, is it says as you cast this spell, if it were to say, let's take Big Score, for instance, right, as an additional cost to cast a spell, X, discard a card. I get how those cards work, right? I guess it's the as you cast the spell that kind of messed me up, I think, with Anhelo. Yeah. So just to make sure I understand what you're saying, we have, Xander Splits Judgment. I just grabbed a random sorcery.
Sure.
I go to cast this, I put it on the stack, and as a part of the casting cost, I sack the Sinister Concierge.
Right.
After everything is said and done, there should be a Xander's at the bottom of the stack, and then there should be a Sinister's Concierge on top of the stack for the death trigger, with a casualty.
As well as the cast trigger of being able to copy that spell, because what casualty has is it represents an additional cost as you're casting it, and then it also has this trigger that happens as a result of using that additional cost. Right. Now here's the thing, like I said, triggers don't go on the stack in the middle of casting the spell. So what happens is you have cast the spell with casualty, we check state-based actions, and now all relevant triggers go onto the stack. So if you had a creature with a death trigger, it tries to go on the stack at the same time that your trigger of when you do this thing, copy the spell. So your copy is trying to go on the stack at the same time. Now, the thing is, when multiple triggers are trying to go on the stack and they're controlled by the same player, that player controls the order with absolute and now here's the thing, the game doesn't care the order in which those triggering events happened, right? Technically the creature died before you finished casting the spell, but the game doesn't care. All it cares is that these triggers are trying to go on the stack at the same time. The example I like to use for that as just a kind of a point of reference is like if somebody does Living Death, right? We sacrifice all our creatures, we put all our creatures that were in the graveyard on the battlefield. There's a little more to it than that, but you know what I'm talking about, right?
Yeah,
and so like,
that's you have rules questions for me.
Now, if you let's only look at your board state, your things that you have. If you have creatures that die with death triggers and creatures that enter with enter the battlefield triggers, The game does not care that the creatures died before the other ones entered for the purpose of ordering the triggers. All it cares about is all those triggers are trying to go on the stack at the same time, so you get to decide the order of all your triggers. So same thing here with your death trigger and the casualty copy the spell trigger, right? Is that it doesn't care that the creature died before you finished casting the spell you're currently casting. It just cares that the copy a spell trigger and the creature's death trigger is trying to go on the stack at the same time, so you get to choose the order.
Yeah, no, 100. That makes 1,000% sense. Hearing you say it kind of as an additional cost to cast the spell definitely started to make a click in the brain. I guess I was unsure reading Anhelo's rules text. I guess that was the part that was kind of throwing me off there a little bit.
Sure.
I don't know why. But,
I think it's because it has that word when you do this, right? Because that's the trigger phrase we look for, right? Triggers use the words when, whenever, or at, right? Yeah.
All right, sweet, man. Hey, I appreciate you, brother. That was dope. That was a really good explanation.
No problem. Glad to help.
Yes, sir.
Now, I ran this past my judge. He's a tier 3 judge. Electro Dominancy.
The 2 red and X, deal X damage, cast a spell from your hand with mana value X or less?
Yep.
Yeah.
Copy. Does it copy the full effect?
It does, actually. So when you're copying a spell on the stack, it copies the value of X, right? So you have two spells that want to deal X damage to potentially 2 different targets, or the same target if you want. That's fine. The ability to cast another spell from your hand is not a trigger from casting that original spell. Like, it's not a trigger. So it's not like when you cast this spell, cast another spell from your hand with X or less for free. If it was a trigger, copying Electro Dominance would not get you that trigger again because you didn't cast the copy, right? But what it is it is an effect as a result of resolving the spell. So what'll happen is you'll Electro Dominance, let's say X equals 5, and then you get a copy on the stack because you did it during combat with Azule, and so you have a copy of Electro Dominance with X equals 5 targeting something, and so now the copy resolves, and as a result of resolving that copy, you deal your 5 damage, you choose a spell from your hand with mana value 5 or less, and you now cast that for free. That resolves on top of the original Electro Dominance. So before the original resolves, you now resolve the spell you're casting off the copy, right? Now the original Electro Dominance resolves, deals its 5 damage, and lets you cast the something else from your hand with mana value 5 or less for free. That goes on the stack, and now you resolve the spell you're casting for free, and that's it. Yeah, but it does give you a separate instance of cast something from your hand for free. Yes.
Okay. And it gives it the X ability.
Right. X in every zone other than the stack, X is 0. Right? But on the stack, X is whatever you have decided X is while you were casting that spell. And if something copies it on the stack, it will copy it with the same value of X. Yes.
So, for example, if I have Isochron Scepter with Dramatic Reversal, Mana Volt, and Soul Ring, pump 1 million mana into this.
Sure.
Then do 2 people.
Yeah, you just nuke 2 players for 1 million damage each. Sure. Yeah.
Okay. Because that's what I did last game, and I was like, I think this works.
Yeah.
But I was told by a judge that it worked, and now I've been told twice. So, because they're trying to rule me backtrack me and say it's an X ability, so it costs 0 for its copy. I was like,
no. So to give a comparison, let's say I cast a Hydra spell, right? A Hydra that has X in green and it enters with X/1/1 counters. It's one of those Hydras, right?
Or just simple as this. Isochron Scepter with Electro Dominance.
Well, no, but I'm just for a comparison here, so you can kind of see the difference, right? Is I cast that Hydra and I let it resolve, and now I have this Hydra on the battlefield with 10 1/1 counters. But if I cast a clone that makes that comes in as a copy of that Hydra, it comes in as a 0/0 because it doesn't see the X as anything but 0 because it's not on the stack anymore, right? It's on the battlefield, X is 0. But if I cast that Hydra spell and I have a way to copy that spell on the stack, I will get another of that Hydra spell with X equals 10 or whatever I made it to be on the stack, and then it'll resolve and get all the appropriate counters and do all that because it copied X on the stack, not X on the battlefield. So same thing with your Electro Dominance, is that you're gonna get X on the stack copied. Now, to address something you just said though, this doesn't work out with Isochron Scepter the way you're hoping. Because if you put Electro Dominance on that Isochron Scepter, you're casting it with an alternate casting cost, which means X has to be 0. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
That's what I was thinking too. Like because I thought about putting it on it, I was like, wait, if I copy the spell would be 0.
Well, because Isochron Scepter doesn't copy the spell. Isochron Scepter copies the card and then casts that copy from exile for free.
So a quick question here. I run an Electro assaulting battering there, or however you said there.
The red doesn't empty from your mana pool, and when it dies,
pay X
you can
and
pay
do it.
X.
Yeah. Well, when he leaves the battlefield, you pay X.
Yeah.
So with that being said, I noticed online there they were talking. There's a combo between him and a Grafted Exoskeleton.
Yeah.
Now I'm curious, how does that exactly work? Considering that it's equipped to him, and then when he leaves the battlefield, that's when his effect triggers. How would that work? That you're able to use the grafted thing with that?
Sure. So the way this works is that Electro refers to himself, right? Electro is the one dealing the damage. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Now here's the thing though, is that when a permanent on the battlefield is referenced, not targeted, but if it's referenced and it's no longer on the battlefield as, oh my goodness, if it's no longer on the battlefield as the ability or the effect is resolving, it uses what's called last known information, right? So for example, just to give you a difference here, if you have a creature on the battlefield and or if I have a creature on the battlefield or whatever, right? If the creature's on the battlefield and I go to like Swords to Plowshares it, right? So we're gonna exile it and you're gonna gain life equal to its power, I believe, right? But like in response, somebody else is like, okay, look, I'm glad to see that gone, but I don't want him gaining all that life because it's like a 20 power creature. So they're like, in response, I'm just gonna murder it, right? So they kill it.
Yep.
And now it's not there. The spell, fizzles. It targeted it, but that target is no longer there, so it doesn't get to do anything, right? Now, if instead, if I cast like a Galta that's like a 12/12, and I have it enter the battlefield while I have a Warstorm Surge in play, right? Warstorm Surge says when I have a creature enter, that creature is it creature of the Warstorm Surge deals damage. It might be, but anyway. But either
I know what you mean.
Either way, damage is going to be dealt equal to that creature's power. But like in response, somebody goes, "I'm going to murder that creature," and now it's not on the battlefield, so there's no power. It's like, no. It uses last known information of how that creature existed on the battlefield, the characteristics it had. So Warstorm Surge still sees 12 power, and goes, it goes deal 12 damage, right? Like that still happens. So here's the thing with things like Electro, is that Electro is still the source of the damage, but more specifically, the last known information of how Electro existed on the battlefield is the source of the damage. So if Electro had lifelink or infect or any of those type of damage dependent characteristics on the battlefield, that trigger will have that characteristic as well. Even if now it would be different if like I have something on the battlefield that triggers to deal damage, and in response you destroy the equipment that was giving it that characteristic. That's different, right? Like, because then as it resolves, it didn't have that characteristic. It doesn't matter if it had that characteristic when it went on the stack. It matters what the last known information is, right? But in Electro's case, the very last thing that the game remembers of it existing on the battlefield is that it had infect because of that Grafted Exoskeleton. So this trigger will deal damage with infect.
Oh, okay, that makes perfect sense.
Yeah, same. Like I said, it'd be the same thing if he had a Loxodon Warhammer on him before he, like right before he died, then, or when he died rather, then the damage would be dealt with lifelink. You know, that type of stuff.
That's okay. That's great. Thank you very much. I've been constantly questioning it. I know, like, I keep hearing it works. I just keep running with it, but it's like I really like to understand how it works.
Sure.
I got another one, which may be a little bit more complicated than that, but I'm looking at. I have a card called Warp World, and I'm sure you're very familiar with it. I'm wondering, how does that resolve when creatures enter with like ETBs?
Sure. Let's see. Each player shuffles all permanents they own library, then reveals that many cards from the top of the library. Each player puts all creatures and lands revealed this way onto the battlefield. Then does the same for enchantments. Then okay. So here's what happens: is basically you have multiple players putting multiple things on the battlefield at the same time, right? So what happens is this. So I think it says what? They put all of the, let's see, does the same for enchant. Okay. Let's see. Artifact
It's
creatures.
all artifacts, creatures.
So artifact creatures and lands enter at the same time. Okay. Cards. Okay, and then does the same for enchantment cards, then put all cards. Okay. So what happens is you're talking about ETB triggers.
Yes.
Okay. So triggering events can happen in the middle of resolving a spell or ability. Right? Triggers, you know, they can happen. So one of the examples I like to give, let me give one that's a little simpler, and then we'll use that to kind of apply to this one. Okay. Living Death. Are you familiar with it?
Oh yes.
Yeah. So basically the short version of Living Death is everything that's on the battlefield gets sacrificed and all the creatures that were in graveyards enter the battlefield, right?
Yep.
So there could be an instance where you have multiple death triggers, multiple enter the battlefield triggers, all kind of happening as a result of Living Death. And even though they technically happened at different times, like the death triggers happen first, then the end of the battlefield triggers, the game does not care. The game handles it the exact same way. So what's going to happen is, let's say it's player 2's turn. Player 2 is the active player, okay? And so each player has all these death triggers and all these ETB triggers going on, you know, trying to happen at the same time. None of them get to go on the stack in the middle of resolving the current spell or ability, right? So the Living Death, the Warp World, you know, when these ETBs happen, all this stuff, even though things died and have death triggers, those triggers don't get to happen yet, right? The triggering event happened, but the triggers kind of wait on the sideline to do something. So that means you don't have to declare targets yet, right? So like if you have a trigger that says when this creature dies, destroy, you know, another target creature, well, all the creatures died at the same time, there are no targets. That doesn't matter. You're going to wait until after Living Death has done its thing, so by then there will be creatures on the battlefield. You'll have a target, right? So same thing with, like, you know, when this creature enters the battlefield, do a thing, or, you know, all those stuff. So the game doesn't care what happened first. All it cares is that all of these triggers are trying to enter the stack at the exact same time. So now that simplifies the process, because we don't care which happened first. So like with Warp World, we don't care that a creature entered before an enchantment. We don't care about that. All that we care is that all of these ETBs are happening at the exact same time, or going on the stack at the same time. So now we fall back to just the general concept of how this is handled in every situation. So for each player, if that player has multiple triggers trying to enter the stack at the same time, so player 2 takes all of their triggers that they have trying to enter the stack at the same time and puts them on the stack in whatever order they like, and they name all their targets in that moment. And this process starts with the active player, right? So they do theirs first.
Okay.
Then the next player in turn order takes all of their triggers that they have and within that stack puts within their own little personal pile, puts them in whatever order they want. So they can't like put something under player 2's triggers. They're all going to be on top of player 2's triggers, but within that pile, whatever order they want, naming all their targets at that time if there are relevant targets, right? Then player 4 does the same thing on top of all this, right? And then player 1 is the last person to put their triggers onto the stack. And this all starts with whoever's turn it was. So if player 2 was the active player, that's what happens. It doesn't matter who cast the warp, like even though Warp World is a sorcery, let's say like player 1 was able to do it at instant speed and they're like, I'm going to do it now. You know, like it doesn't matter that player 1 cast it. It's the fact that player 2 is the active player. They put all their triggers on the stack first. Then player 3, then player 4, then player 1.
And then resolves in rotating order.
And then it resolves in reverse order. Exactly.
Yeah.
So whoever is the last in turn order kind of has the best position in that point because they get to see what all these other targets are before they decide on their own targets, and they get to resolve their effects first.
Yeah. Okay. Now, if we're using that, like let's keep with the Warp World thing going.
Yeah, sure.
And let's throw Electro Battering Assault there. Let's throw him back into the equation. So when this all happens, like you're saying, the LTB effects, they all get put to the side until we deal with all of like the resolution of essentially the resolution of Warp World, where we bring everybody's stuff back in, and then Electro's trigger would go on. Like for example, if I'm the one to cast
saying
Warp
in
World,
the right because we shuffled all this stuff. Yeah.
So technically, he's leaving the battlefield at that point, and I'm able to trigger his ability. Now, would I resolve that if I'm the one to cast it, since I put my triggers on the stack first? Am I putting his leave the battlefield trigger on top of the enter the battlefield triggers, or does his come in after, say, like if I'm player 2 using your same example, and then player 1 goes, do I put my leave the battlefield triggers on top of player 1?
It doesn't matter the order in which things left or entered the battlefield. That's why I like to use Living Death as the example, because again, same thing with like the death triggers and the enter the battlefield triggers, right? It doesn't matter that the creatures died before other creatures entered. I get to order them however I want. So in your situation with Warp World and Electro, is that let's say you have Electro leave the battlefield because of Warp World, and you have another creature enter the battlefield that has some sort of a trigger. You know, when this enters the battlefield, get 4 mana. I don't know, just to say it, right?
Yeah.
You can order those triggers in whatever order you want, so that you put the Electro trigger on the stack first, and then the other enter the battlefield trigger on the stack after that, so you can get the mana, so you can spend it on the Electro trigger as it resolves. You know, so the game doesn't care that Electro left the battlefield before something else entered. It cares that the Electro leaves the battlefield trigger and the other creatures enter the battlefield trigger are trying to go on the stack simultaneously. And for that reason, you get to, as the controller of those triggers, you get to put them in whatever order you want.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay. I like that.